You're live. Okay, there's somebody saying that I'm live. Hi, everyone. If you're watching this after the fact, hello, and thank you for clicking on it. This is my first live, so let me see. Okay, now I should be live. Uh, I'm enlisting because this is my first live. I'm enlisting the help of my siblings to let me know that I'm on and visible. So, oh, they can see me. Hello. You guys can say hi in the chat because you guys are probably the only ones here. But this way, I'm also not just talking to myself. Although if I am just talking to myself, like that's totally fine. Like class is that way sometimes. Okay, they can both see me. So hello to the siblings, except the one that decided not to come help me and show up. Okay, so today I want to talk about the Poppy War. I've been wanting to read this book for quite a long time. Hello. And by the way, siblings, you're allowed to log off now that I have verified that I'm visible on YouTube and all that, or you can stick around if you want. But so this is a over 500-page book, so it worked for Tome Topple as well, but it's a fantasy set in China, in a kind of fantastical China. And I've been wanting to read it ever since I heard that she does a representation. Oh, hello, Priscilla's here. Ever since I found out that there was a depiction of the Nanking Massacre, I really wanted to read it because it's a little known kind of point in history. Until recently, it wasn't not taught in American history books. It wasn't taught in Chinese history books. It wasn't taught in Japan either. And kind of, it's more understandable why it wouldn't be taught in Japan, the Nanking Massacre, because obviously they did horrific things, like the Japanese military did horrific things in Nanking and throughout World War II. So it kind of makes more sense, although there's a little bit more of an effort in Japan to get them to at least acknowledge and kind of put it in the textbooks. In China, though, it doesn't get taught either. And part of it is like the politics in China after World War II, in which you don't want to depict China, or they didn't want to depict China as a weak country where like the Japanese defeated them and all of that. So like the politics of it were interesting. In addition, China has a lot of economic relationships with Japan. And there was a lot of feeling of like, we don't want to talk about this massacre because it would upset the Japanese. And like you see that happening with other kind of these kinds of events, right? Like the Armenian genocide. It's also like a lot of current politics are involved in whether it gets acknowledged or not, and how like the diplomacy between international countries work. So I was so excited that it was being featured in this book. And then I found out that Kwong it's actually like, she has an advanced degree in like, China studies and stuff. And reading this book, I could totally tell. I don't know if you could tell, but like she's bringing together, even in the early part of the story, a lot of like Chinese history from like both ancient history and modern history. Like right at the beginning, one of the first things that jump out at me is Sun Tzu's The Art of War. I forgot what she calls it in here. She doesn't call it that, but it's Sun Tzu's Principles of War is what it's called in here. And I was like, that's a direct reference to The Art of War. Which the last time I taught ancient history, I used in my class, so it was kind of more fresh in my mind. But for everybody who followed me on Instagram, this is the one book that I would really recommend for people who want to learn more about the Nanking Massacre. This is called The Rape of Nanking by Iris Chang. This is really the book that, when it was published, and not that long ago, really kind of started all this. Yeah, right. Yeah, it started bringing back this history, and in fact, there's now been a movement in China to have this taught more. But this book did kind of one of the first tellings of that history, and it's still one of the few books, academic books, that tells the history of the Nanking Massacre / the Rape of Nanking. And she has like images in here. It's really difficult history to look and see But I think it's important to put it in here. I can totally tell she's a historian. Yeah. And then I also recommended City of Life and Death for it. This is a fictional depiction of it, and it was a huge deal when it came out. It's not meant for a Western audience, so it does have subtitles, but if you're watching it, I think it's in Mandarin. Yeah, it's in Mandarin with optional English subtitles, but it was really controversial when it came out in China in 2011 because part of what it depicts is the viewpoint of the Japanese soldiers. And that was a controversial part in China where a lot of people objected to depicting the Japanese soldiers kind of as young boys and kind of telling their perspective too, as well as the perspective of the victims in the city of Nanking. But I always warn people, like, this is the kind of thing that you want to look for because it really centers the Chinese and the Japanese experience rather than the Western experience, because there were Westerners at the massacre of Nanking. Actually, there was Rabe, there was this German Nazi official in Nanking. And a lot of the history that we get in the West of the massacre of Nanking comes from a lot of these Western sources. And it's really interesting because this Nazi official actually was able to negotiate with the Japanese to create an international zone in the middle of Nanking, where the Japanese agreed that anybody within that international zone would be left alone. They would not be killed, they would not be raped, nothing would happen to it because there were a lot of foreigners in the city of Nanking that wanted protection. So the Japanese allowed this German official to set up that zone. And a lot of these international people there who were there on business and for diplomatic reasons wrote about what they were seeing. So we have evidence of this massacre, not just from the survivors of it, but also from the foreigners that were there. There's a documentary called Nanking that came out in 2011, and it's usually the one I show in class because until recently I didn't have the DVD of this one. And the main problem with that documentary is that it really centers the viewpoints of the foreigners, of the Westerners. And for me, it's really important that, okay, that kind of information is fine, but those are not necessarily the stories that need to be centered. It's more of the Chinese stories that need to be, centered when talking about this massacre because they were the primary victims, right? And I really like. It was a hard chapter to read in here, but I really liked how it was brought in by Kwong, because I felt like it was taken seriously without making it like over dramatic or sensationalizing what happened. Some of the survivors talk about, like, one that really stands out to me in one of the documentaries was this man who's now an older man talking about how his mom was killed. He saw his mom being killed and raped. She was dying, but he had an infant, a baby brother, who needed to be nursed. And the mom, as she's dying and there's blood all over her, like, takes off her top so she can nurse the baby boy. And like, that's horrific. That's really horrific. And the mom ends up dying and the baby brother ends up dying. And so this kid, now older man in the documentary, was the only survivor of his family. Right? And a lot of the people who survived end up surviving through like weird things, like they were hiding underneath dead bodies or things like that. And now I'm getting really emotional because thinking about all the stories that I've heard from the survivors. But I didn't want this to be super depressing or just about that, because I think the book is about so much more than that, right? Like, that is probably why I love this book so much. It was a 5-star read for me. But because I went in thinking, oh, there's going to be a lot of history, so I'll be able to talk about it. So much, yes, it was, didn't feel like it was included for shock. So yeah. But like, so it's much more than just like talking about history, right? Like, one of the parts that stood out to me was the beginning, the whole Rin going to the military academy because that felt like going to college, right? Because there's so many she's experiencing a lot of the shock of like coming from a different class, being of a different gender, the majority of the students. And that to me reminded me a lot of what like college can be like for first generation students, for working class students, where you go in and you don't quite fit in because you don't have the same kind of background that a lot of the other kids had, like, having I had taken AP classes, but a lot of times when you first go to college, I felt like everybody had like taken college classes already and had tutors and all these things to go to school, and like I didn't have the same kind of resources that some of my classmates had, and I felt like, oh, I really connected with Rin on that here of like feeling like totally like unprepared. And that was actually my same experience in graduate school, when it felt like everybody knew what they were doing and we were all like competing with each other, and it was cutthroat. And like in the end, like I had to realize that no one knew what they were doing. Even the ones who'd had a lot of previous experience with like academia didn't really know what they were doing. And once I figured that out, it helped a lot. And I'm like, Rin doesn't quite figure that out. She just kind of like fights and claws her way to the top, like having to work, 5 times as hard as everybody else. And, I kind of appreciated seeing that just because she entered this exclusive academy, like things didn't just automatically become easy for her, that it was still really difficult. She was still having to deal with the stigma of being of a lower class and having darker skin. I just saw, or while I was doing the read along, I saw on Twitter the author post that all of the covers except, what was it? I think it was the Indonesian cover, don't depict Rin with darker skin. Like this one, the American cover, like it's not like she's being depicted as white or anything, but because it's in black and white sketch, it's not emphasizing that she has darker skin. And that the only cover that has Rin with dark skin is the Indonesian one, which says a lot about the politics and economics of covers in the publishing world. Let's see. I do have the Dragon Republic. It still has the Barnes & Noble sticker here to read, and it looks like it's longer. But I know that the third book will be coming out, so I might wait till that release date for the third book is closer to read this one. But part of me really wanted to just jump in straight into the Dragon Republic, so part 2 of that. Let's see, I have a whole lot more to say about this book. Let's see what else. I talked a little bit about class, gender. Oh, that was so interesting. I need to do a little bit of research. Can't wait to pick up the Dragon Republic. I need to do a little bit of research about contraception in ancient China, because that whole scene with Rin, like taking that potion that supposedly made her unable to have children, like I have a lot of questions about that, because one, there was a lot of contraceptive knowledge in the ancient world about like how to stop, or how to prevent pregnancies and how to end pregnancies. So I'm sure that the Chinese actually had things that would work for that, because we know from actually Arab scholars, Muslim scholars preserved a lot of ancient knowledge on that. The problem though with a lot of the stuff that was saved is that you get recipes on how to like induce abortions and prevent pregnancy, but you don't know 100% whether they worked, because the recipes are not super precise. But we know that some of them did work because of the ingredients that are on there. Sometimes we can match them to flowers and things that we know today, and we know that they do work to like induce abortions and prevent pregnancy. But I want to look up and see what kinds of things they had in ancient China, because, well, one, that's kind of one of my area of specialties is the history of contraception and abortion, though I mostly do Western Europe. So I'm really interested to learn more about that. And I wonder if it's really true that Rin can't have children. Once well, spoiler alert, once we find out that she is a Spearly, and that there's only two of them left, I thought maybe that we would learn that actually she can have children. But that's also the thing about Kwong, right? I felt like every time I had figured out like where the story was going to go, where she was going to take it, she like shifted in a totally different direction, right? Like first, the story about Rin trying to get to this military academy to escape an arranged marriage, great, and then now we're talking about metaphysical things and lore and connection with the gods. Like that totally threw me for a loop. I was not expecting all that discussion about gods and how to access the spirit world to be there. But it totally made sense within the story. I was like, it's a story about kind of a war in military training, and like, of course, gods are involved, and of course they're trying to access the gods. Like it just made a lot of sense the way she wrote it. It didn't seem like it was coming out of nowhere, but at the same time it was surprising because I hadn't read a lot of reviews. I hadn't heard a lot of reviews of books. So I didn't know that that was a theme within the story, which is also why I loved it. I was like, whatever you're interested in, I was like, if you're interested in history, this book has something for you. If you are interested in kind of more theological, philosophical discussions, this book has something for you. If you're interested more in like war and violence, this has a lot of stuff for you. Like it has so much. I don't, even though it's a over 500-page book, I'm still like amazed about how much she put in here, like just so much. And from what I hear, the Dragon Republic is going to be very similar, where she's just going to be throwing a lot of stuff at us. And I'm so here for it. Right? Oh, the chosen trope. Yes. Because that is a really big part of the theme, right? That Rin is on a journey. And I was like, okay, she's in like a kind of hero's journey. There's some lessons she needs to learn, things about herself she needs to learn. And I'm like, but then it's not just that. And the gods for power, yes. And the drug stuff. Like, there's a lot of drug use towards the end of the book, right? And I like using drugs as a way to escape the presence of the gods. Felt like a really powerful idea to me. That Alton, for him, because he has a constant connection to the phoenix, to that god, and that when you have that kind of access to a god and to the god's power, like it's not like humans are not meant to have that, and that opium becomes his like escape route. It's his moment in which he's not constantly feeling that godlike power in him. And that was the other thing that really shocked me about the book, was that I did not feel like Kwong was being judgmental of the opium use. Rin from the beginning, because she has seen what addiction can do to people. And because her step-parents are drug dealers, that Rin is very judgmental about drug use, but that Kwong wasn't asking us to be judgmental, that she was actually asking us to be compassionate towards Alton and to kind of understand that he's doing the best in the situation he's in, and that he's way too young to be put in that position, and that he's being used, right? Like I felt that Alton was being used by the government as like a way of creating super soldiers, and that nobody cares what happens to him as a person, except the lore master, who isn't given access, isn't ultimately given access to him. So, yeah. Let's see what else. Oh, the lack of romance in this book. I've noticed some people had noted that there's no romance, and like you expected, because Rin ends up getting close to a lot of like different men, but none of those relationships are romantic relationships. They're either like mentoring relationships, commander-commandee relationship, friendships, camaraderie. There's a lot of that, but there's no romantic relationships in the story. If anybody's read the Dragon Republic, you can tell us if that changes. But I'm not somebody that minds romance in fantasy because I read a lot of fantasy romance anyway. But it was really interesting that like at no point is there even a hint of like romance. Like maybe at sometimes the audience might expect it. Like I sometimes thought, oh, maybe. And then no, just isn't there. You're not going to find it. So I thought that was really interesting. Let me see if there's anything else in here. The other thing was that stood out to me, the other theme was cause and effect, right? That whatever actions you take, there's going to be consequence. Like that's a big part of how the humans access the power of the gods. Like, yeah, you can ask the gods to do something for you, but there will be a consequence to it. So they're going to ask for something in return or something's going to happen. But that also plays out the same in like military decisions, right? Like the Federation massacres the city, kills everybody in it, but there will be a consequence for that. And the fact that ends up being Rin's decision and that she makes the decision that she does. Interested in romance. Oh, you read her as Ace. Oh. Say romantic. That's an interesting proposition, Priscilla. I think you might be right because she doesn't express romantic feelings towards anyone. Like even at the beginning when she's rejecting the arranged marriage, she doesn't reject the arranged marriage because she is waiting for romance or for love. She rejects it as like, no, I want to get out of this. I want to make my own choices, not because she needs love in a romantic relationship. Yeah, I hadn't thought about that, but that's a really good. I can absolutely see that. Yeah. So cause and effect, yeah, about every action having a consequence. And that now at the end, when Rin makes the decision that she does, there will be consequences to it, right? I guess I can spoil things. The fact that she chooses to eliminate the island, the Federation, what were their name? I keep thinking of them as the Federation, but that's the fighting force. And they're the Muang, something like that. I keep forgetting. Honestly, when I read stuff, a lot of names and things like that just don't stick in my head. So a lot of times I have to write myself notes as I'm reading when I'm trying to remember some of those names. Let's see, the Dragon Republic. Oh, there's a cute, I actually skipped this. At the end, there's like list of like the different groups. The Mikara Empire and no, we want the Federation. Well, either way, she's destroyed the island and she has chosen to do that, and like she chose to do that, understanding, like having already seen what the destruction of like completely destroying a city was like, so that now there will be consequences to what she's done, and I'm guessing that we will see some of that play out in the Dragon Republic. Although now understanding a little bit more of what Kwang does in these books, I'm like, maybe not. Maybe Kwang's going to take us in a totally different direction for the Dragon Republic. Either way, I'm really excited to see where she takes this story. And I'm so glad that it's at least a 3-book series. If anybody knows, you can let us know if there's going to be more than 3. But I'm like, I can keep reading these stories for a long time. As long as Kwang wants to write them, I will read them. I'm now 100% sold on her writing. And if she wants to write outside of the series, I will also like support because I was just so incredibly like impressed and immersed in this story as I was reading. And this is what I ask in writing. I think for me, what I ask books to do is 2 things. I need them to be intellectually stimulating, Although that doesn't always have to be the case, but if they're intellectually stimulating, that's going to help them get 5 stars from me. And 2, it has to be like emotionally, has to get me in the feels. And if a book can do that, then it's going to be a 5-star read for me. It's just a trilogy, okay. Well, I'm like, whatever Kwon wants to do, I am now a lifelong fan of hers. And I've also been following her on Twitter, and I really like a lot of what she has to say. So I'm fully on board with her. And now I'm really in a fantasy kick. I've been reading a lot of fantasy, so I'll continue with that. Although, by the way, I think like you need, or because this is kind of dark and heavy, I did decide to pick up something lighter after finishing The Poppy War, and I picked up Don't Date Rosa Santos. And I'm like 150 pages in, and this is like the perfect antidote to something heavy and like violent, because this is just like a warm hug and like a ray of sunshine. Don't Date Rosa Santos. And I'm probably gonna binge read it for the rest of the day. I'm like, it's holographic, so you can't see it, and my cover's all the way over there. But I thought this was a good antidote for something really, really heavy. So we're almost hitting the 30-minute mark. So I don't want to take up too much of people's time, because even though I do like to talk a lot, even in my review videos. Priscilla, did you have anything to add? I feel like we should have just done like a buddy read with this. So I could have just messaged you more, because I want to hear your review. I don't know if you're going to do dedicated review to it on your channel, but if you do, I really want to hear more of what you have to say on it. Nope. Okay. Well, it's a beautiful book. Yes, I'm so loving it so far. And in fact, I think I'm going to buy another copy of Don't Date Rosa Santos and sending it to my sister who just graduated from college. And because I feel it's like, because that's the stage in life that Rosa is at, like finishing high school and going to college. She's dealing with a lot of the same themes that you deal with when you're graduating college. Villain? Do I feel like a villain of the story? So yeah, that's interesting. So it didn't hit me actually until like towards the end of the book that Rin really is kind of a villain. Like with some of the other characters, when you think about like from their perspective, that their actions make sense. And then obviously the decision she makes to destroy the Federation Island, I was just like, how could you do that? Like that's villain type decision. And I guess for me, I just connected with her so much in the beginning that like I could forgive, or I can understand all of her actions until that last one. I feel like that last one, she's crossed the line. And the power thing, yeah. Yeah, she's consumed by the attention she gets from the power, and that she wants it, that people are trying to warn her, right? Not just her master, but also like the gatekeeper, right? That they are warning her this power is dangerous. You don't want anything to do with it. And she keeps like just thinking, power, I want to feel that way again. I want to feel that way. Into the spirit. I was just reading that Rin's character is inspired by Mao, that Kwon based Rin on Mao Zedong, and he becomes this dictator type person. And I don't know a ton of my Mao history, so like I can't do a good comparison of them. But that's the idea of like somebody coming from humble beginnings and then getting access to power, and then like how it changes them. I can totally see that. And there's hints of that. Yeah. And this is where like somebody can be good or can start off being a good person or good intentions, and then power can corrupt them, and that it's a slow process. I don't know. That might be what we're seeing with Rinha. We might be seeing her being kind of consumed with power because that decision she made of destroying the island, that was not okay with me. That was not okay with me, but we'll see where it goes. Oh, really? Yeah. So I didn't look too much into it because I wanted to just kind of finish the story, but I saw somebody post about how it was inspired by Mao, and I'm going to check and see if Kwang's website has anything more on it. If she has resources for people who are interested in more of that. No, but yeah, I need to look into that too. Yeah. Let's see. Is there anything else? Like I said, I could go on and on forever on this topic. I had originally, this semester, I was supposed to teach a class on the history of violence. And I was working on an assignment where I would have students read something of fiction. And I was going to recommend The Poppy War, because in that class we talk about the Nanking Massacre. And I didn't get to teach that class because of enrollment issues. But when I teach that class again, Poppy War, I think I will continue developing that assignment. And maybe not like suggest the whole book, but maybe at least like a portion of it, because I think I could get really nice papers from students reflecting on kind of power and violence, or at least the power and violence we see there. Oh, we should. There we go. We should buddy read book 2. Absolutely, Priscilla. We just have to pick a time to do it. And I'm like, I like, especially heavier books, I feel like they're great to buddy read with somebody because you can then kind of process everything that you're reading with somebody else. Yeah. Let's see. Are my siblings still in here? I give them permission to leave. But I'm like, I needed to know that at least somebody would be on the feed so I could tell if it was going live or not. But now I can see. I'm using what is it called, StreamYard, and this makes it actually really easy. Yeah, yeah. All right. We'll set up a time to buddy read it. And surprisingly, both of my dogs have been quiet. I was really afraid that my dogs would be super loud during this live stream, but they both went to sleep. Because usually I can edit out most of their barking on my videos, although some of their barks still come through. Okay. All right. Well, I think I will. And Dora's still here. Dora is like my book buddy too, like in real life book buddy, because she and I like exchange book recommendations all the time, my sister. But okay, I will end the stream here, and I will probably post it on YouTube if I can figure out how to do it, so that anybody that isn't here can watch it. But thank you to those that showed up today, and I will see you in the next video. Yeah. All right. Bye, guys. Thank you. I'm so glad too. Now, where do I press? All right. Bye. Figured it out.